I'm here with the forecast for all the members, member forecast for Scorpio, that new moon in Scorpio. And so we'll talk about that now. We have Venus and Jupiter conjunct still in Libra, and bringing a certain amount of emphasis on our relationships. Still, Jupiter has been in Libra for a couple months, and since Jupiter has been in Libra, we've had this resurgence and this whole thing around relationships and mutual respect and all of that stuff that I talked about when Jupiter went in Libra, and how it's going to be a time of social justice, relationship justice. Talked about that a couple months ago. If you haven't seen my Jupiter in Libra web class, you should see it, because that's the universal theme of Jupiter in Libra for the next year. And then since Saturn went into Sagittarius, we've really seen that whole reckoning with justice and truth also come out. We've seen more and more, political situations get pushed to their brink, both with, especially, we can really see it in the U.S. politics with indictments against Trump's, cabinet and people like, Paul Manafort and others, but also all of this renewed thing about Hillary Clinton and the Democrats. And so we see, again, this polarizing, but this sense of justice and a sense of consequences and a revisiting of the legitimacy of these things with Saturn, which is about consequences and truth over time, going into Sagittarius, which is about the legal system and all of that. So these themes are kind of a backdrop. This is why we're seeing so much emphasis on, again, like sexual impropriety, again, a sense of justice around that. And also with Rahu now in Cancer, again, I said this when Rahu left Leo and the nodal axis left the Leo Aquarius axis and went into the Cancer Capricorn axis, that there would be more emphasis on women, the divine feminine, women's issues. It comes out just like I said in that regard. So this is the backdrop. I talk about these three things because they're larger cycles. And then within those larger cycles, we have these monthly cycles. And so this cycle of Scorpio is happening now. And this will affect each of the 12 signs differently. So it's different for Aries, Scorpio, Gemini, Taurus, because of where Scorpio falls. And again, these are the real things to focus on day to day, or I should say month to month, and then day to day, each forecast operates within that. So these 30-day themes will be important for each of the 12 signs. So starting from this point, or basically it's November 18th, for all intents and purposes, it's really tomorrow is when it starts. Because even though I'm recording this November 17th at 9 p.m., the moon is still not an exact conjunction between the sun and moon. That's going to happen early tomorrow morning. So starting with November 18th, and for about the next 30 days until the moon comes back and joins the sun again in the sky, we're all going to be working on these Scorpio themes, which has to do with exploring our emotional stresses and weaknesses, trying to see beyond just those things that are triggering us and our fears. Scorpio comes after Libra. The sign of Libra is that sign where we're trying to connect with others and we're evaluating, am I giving more than I'm receiving? And we achieve some balance and harmony, or at least we try to, with another person. And there's a association, a sort of dynamic tension between two people. But then in Scorpio, it's the pressure of trying to keep that together, to keep that alive. It's a fixed water sign, so it comes in to try to stabilize emotionally and psychologically that sort of dynamic tension that exists in Libra, which is always having to constantly renegotiate and stay in equilibrium. So in Scorpio, we try to stabilize that and connect with something that's more stable and solid in ourself, in our heart. But often we also just become sort of fanatically obsessed with, again, trying to stabilize and fix it and say, okay, now that we're in this relationship, let's stabilize it and fix it. But the relationship itself is dynamic. It's always moving. So that creates tension in the Scorpio mode of life, particularly because Scorpio is emotional, and the emotions are always uncertain. They're always, fluid. It's a flow. It's not a stable structure. So one of the ways to stabilize emotion, to stabilize water, is to freeze it. This is why Scorpio can seem very cold on the surface. Just like frozen water, just like a lake. The lake itself isn't frozen solid, it's just frozen on the surface. Underneath, there's still a current, there's still fish, there's still life, but on the surface it's icy and frozen. That's a very easy way. This is why people who have a lot of Scorpio planets often put on this kind of icy exterior. It's kind of a barrier to sort of entry, because they sense that once they let you in and you go down into the surface, or you plunge into their emotional depth, then it's harder to control. So people who have a lot of Scorpio energy are often sort of icy and cold on the surface, because once you get beneath the surface, then their feelings don't leave very easily. They're kind of stuck with those feelings, and they try to stabilize them. And so Scorpio is a sign where there's a lot of loyalty. At least people who have a lot of Scorpio energy are often very loyal to those people that they love and their friends. They don't give up on them. Once something gets into their heart, it's in there for a long time. But again, it can also be difficult because they also have a hard time letting go, and that can sort of back up on them. And again, I'm not just talking about people. You might be saying, well, I don't have any planets in Scorpio. It's a part of our life. We all have some part of it. And what happens is when we don't have planets in a sign, or if it's an area that's kind of conspicuously negligent, or sort of conspicuously absent, like if Mars is really weak, or other things where that energy isn't so well developed, then it's something that we avoid, something that's really uncomfortable. And in fact, even for certain signs, like I happen to be Gemini, where Scorpio is the 6th house, it's a difficult energy. It doesn't mean I get to avoid it. So don't think when I talk about signs, you have to get out of the idea that it's I'm a this or I'm a that. We're all of it. That's what it is. You also are a Scorpio, or you have to integrate those lessons of Scorpio, whether you have planets there or not. Again, when we have planets there, it makes that thing very noticeable, and we're obviously working more actively with that energy. But it doesn't mean just because we don't that we don't work on it. So anyway, often we work on it with people that come into our life who are of a different sign or what have you. So, but when people have a lot of planets there, or when they're actively working on that energy a lot, they're trying to develop this depth where they're not defining themselves by the outer forms of attachment and emotional pressure and emotional attachment that can come, but in, you know, with our relationships and with people that we care about. Because again, this is where Scorpio energy can get really off the rails, because again, all human relationships and all worldly interactions are inherently unpredictable. They're not stable. And in Scorpio, we become aware of that. We become aware that, wow, I've let this thing into my heart and I really care about it and I don't want to lose it. Because if I lose the connection to this thing that I love, I lose connection to the very life force itself. I lose connection to my heart and to my focal point of existence, because the heart is the focal point of our existence. So these are the themes that we're all working on for the next 30 days. Whether we have planets there or not, these are going to be the themes. Having to connect with our heart, having to go deeper into our heart rather than staying on the surface, trying to control external circumstances because we're not in control of our inner depth and that inner emotional self. And looking at our tendency to avoid and to compartmentalize things that we don't like, people we don't like, things that scare us. Again, we put on this icy exterior to insulate us from things we're emotionally afraid of. Again, this is whether people have planets in Scorpio or not. And in fact, many times it's the ones where it's the signs where Scorpio is difficult. Like I said, I just mentioned Gemini is one, of course. You know, Aquarius, it's not so easy. Not so easy for Taurus people. Virgo, it's a stressful sign, even Libra. Those are the ones that will often create that kind of icy exterior in some ways. Or at least, even if it's not icy, maybe they'll just keep the surface of the water obscured. This is what Gemini, for example, and Virgo might do. So instead of really going into the heart, I'll confess as a Gemini, I probably do this. Again, often where these signs are difficult, they're sort of unconscious energies. We don't really notice our kind of adaptation strategies. So for instance, a Gemini will adapt or often keep people at bay. Rather than turning the surface icy, they'll just kind of use things like humor or play or a lot of different things to kind of deflect so that people don't get to know them with a lot of depth. Because if people get to know them with a lot of depth, let's say like with the Gemini, then it's harder to just be fun and light and enjoyable and things that Gemini wants, because all of that Scorpio energy from the 6th house sucks them into things that don't feel natural. So this is how you can understand the zodiac as this mandala of holistic energy. Every sign is in relation to every other one. And those places where Scorpio is, feels more natural, particularly from the water signs, the signs ruled by Jupiter, the sun, the moon, where that feels more natural, there's not as much stress. But where it's unnatural, those qualities of Scorpio become more confusing, and you'll see a lot of illusion around it. So this is what I always look for as an astrologer. I understand which signs, which elements, which planetary rulerships and rulers are just stressful for the individual. So Mercury people, especially Scorpio is not so easy. Saturn ruled people, like for Capricorn and Aquarius, Scorpio is also just not an easy sign. So if those are your rising signs and those are the rulers, then it's often a little stressful, especially the Mercury, Venus, and Saturn ruled people. That'll be Taurus, Gemini, Virgo, Libra, Aquarius, Capricorn. Scorpio is just naturally a little more difficult to integrate. But whether it's easy or not, we have to deal with it. This is what our life cycles are. And we get to, every 30 days, work on a new lesson. And it ebbs and flows because, like, for instance, those Gemini, Aquarius, Saturn people just got 30 days of Libra, which is very auspicious for them. Full of creativity and growth. But it's not so easy. That Libra energy is actually not so easy for Jupiter-ruled people, Sun-ruled people, Mars-ruled people. For them, it's uncomfortable. So it's really important to understand the zodiac in this way. We're always kind of working on things that feel more comfortable for a while, and they feel difficult, and they sort of, especially like each month. That's why I do these forecasts, and that's why I've been doing them for years. Literally, I mean, I've been doing these forecasts consistently for more than 10 years. Full moon and new moon forecasts for all 12 signs. I've been doing this a long time, and I've been tracking this for a long time.